A whisper from regret. Hello, it's us again, in the quiet of the night, where time itself seems to slow down. Have you ever wished you had a time machine? No, not to go back and prevent a war, or to buy Bitcoin in 2010. We, ordinary people, need it for much more important things. We need a time machine to go back 5 minutes, to not accidentally send that blunt, okay, message to our boss in the middle of the night, to go back to last night and have the courage to say no to the third piece of cake, so we don't have to face the harsh truth on the scale this morning, or to go back to that argument this afternoon, just to deliver the perfect, witty comeback that you only just thought of while washing your hair. A line that could have changed the entire outcome, but it arrived a few hours too late. These trivial regrets, the never-ending what-ifs. Why are we so obsessed with the past? Is traveling back in time physically possible? Or is it just a defense mechanism of the mind to cope with the present? Before we start this time machine, let's tune into the same frequency. Please press subscribe to lock in our frequency for next time. Click the little bell, like a gentle ping, signaling that you are ready to listen. And most importantly, leave a comment and let me know if you could go back to any moment in the last 24 hours. When would you go back to, and what would you do? Thank you. Now, from those trivial regrets, let's go a little deeper into the physical laws that truly govern the flow of time. Because before we can break the rules, we have to know what the rules of the universe are. And these rules, astonishingly, are not nearly as rigid as we've always thought. Einstein and the river of time. For most of human history, we assumed that time was an absolute constant. A second year is also a second on Mars. Your hour is just as long as the hour of a jellyfish floating at the bottom of the ocean. Time was a straight arrow, a train that only traveled in one direction at a constant speed for everyone. But then, in the early 20th century, a patent clerk in Switzerland named Albert Einstein did what office workers often do when they're bored. He daydreamed. And from those daydreams, he completely rewrote the rules of the universe. In his theory of relativity, Einstein showed that time is not a straight line, but a river that can flow fast, flow slow, and even be bent by large rocks. The rocks here are speed and gravity. Simply put, time slows down the faster you move, and the closer you are to an object with a large mass. This isn't just a theory. It has been proven experimentally. An atomic clock placed on an airplane flying around the Earth will run a tiny fraction of a second slower than a clock on the ground. An astronaut who lives on the International Space Station for 6 months will age about 0.005 seconds less than we do. That number is too small for you to notice, too small for you to brag to your friends that, I just got 1,000th of a second younger. But in principle, it has proven something extraordinary. Time travel is real. At least, one-way travel to the future. Theoretically, if you could build a spaceship that travels at nearly the speed of light, you could take a trip for a few years and, upon returning to Earth, thousands of years would have passed. You would have officially become a traveler to the future. This was the first time in history that the door to time travel was cracked open by science. But it also opened another door, one leading to philosophical headaches and endless paradoxes. Because if traveling to the future is possible, why can't we go back to the past? And this is where the real fun begins. The grandfather paradox, the classic headache. This is the most famous paradox. The first question anyone thinking about time travel must confront. It's as simple as this. You build a time machine. You go back in time to when your grandfather was still a young, skinny, and shy young man, and somehow, you accidentally cause an event that prevents your grandfather from meeting your grandmother. You don't have to do anything as dramatic as pushing him off a cliff. No, you just need to accidentally spill an iced coffee on the only white shirt he planned to wear on his first date with her. He loses his confidence, cancels the date, they never meet again. So what happens? If your grandparents don't meet, your father will not be born, and if your parents don't exist, then you will never be born either. But if you were never born, how could you have gone back in time to spill that coffee? Boom. It's a logical loop with no escape. Your existence has just erased itself. Like an Instagram story, you disappear after 24 hours. But in this case, you disappear from the timeline itself. Your action in the past has nullified the cause of that action. The universe has just experienced a glitch. This paradox suggests a fundamental rule. The past seems to be protected by a kind of logical firewall. Any action that could change an event that led to your own existence would create an unsolvable contradiction. These paradoxes are incredible, aren't they? They make us question the very nature of reality. By the way, I have a question for you. If you could go back in time to witness any single historical event without being allowed to interfere, which event would you choose and why? Share it in the comments. I'm very curious about your choices. The bootstrap paradox, the story with no beginning. If the grandfather paradox is about erasing a cause, the bootstrap paradox is about creating something from nothing. Imagine you are a huge Beethoven fan. You take his immortal Fifth Symphony, travel back in time to the 18th century, and find Beethoven during the creative crisis. You hand him the sheet music and say, "Here, Mr. Beethoven, I believe this is your masterpiece from the future." Beethoven, after a moment of astonishment, copies the music and publishes it to the world. It becomes a masterpiece, passed down through centuries, until one day, you hear it and decide to take it back in time to Beethoven. So the question is, who actually wrote that symphony? Not you. You just copied it from the future. Not Beethoven either. He just copied it from you. The symphony has no origin. It simply exists in a closed time loop, being its own cause. To make it easier to understand, it's exactly like seeing a hilarious meme online. You don't know who created it. You just save it and post it on your page. Your friends find it funny, save it from your page, and post it again, and so on. The meme becomes an orphan of the internet. No one knows its ancestor. It just exists and spreads. This paradox reveals an even stranger problem. Time travel not only risks destroying information, but it could also create information out of thin air, violating one of the most fundamental laws of physics, the law of conservation of energy and information. The universe's escape hatch, the many worlds theory. Faced with these mind-bending paradoxes, physicists, instead of giving up and doing something easier like beekeeping, have proposed a few theories to solve the problem. One of the most elegant and insane theories is the many worlds interpretation by Hugh Everett III. This theory suggests that every time an event has multiple possible outcomes, the universe splits. All possibilities happen, but in different parallel universes. Now, let's apply this to time travel. When you go back in time and spill coffee on your grandfather's shirt, you don't change your original timeline. Instead, your action creates a new branch of reality, a parallel universe. In your original universe, the one you came from, everything proceeds as it did. Your grandparents still meet, fall in love, and you are still born to one day build a time machine and disappear from that universe. But in a newly created parallel universe, there is another version of your grandfather struggling to wash a coffee stain off his shirt, missing his fateful date. In that universe, you will never exist. This way, The grandfather paradox is resolved. You don't erase yourself. You just create a world where you don't exist. And you're stuck there, a rather sad ending for a time trip, but at least the logic of the universe is preserved. The same goes for the bootstrap paradox. Beethoven's symphony doesn't come from nowhere. He comes from another universe. There is some original universe where Beethoven actually wrote the symphony himself. Someone from that universe brought it to another, and so on. It spread through the branches of reality. The many worlds theory is like nature's escape hatch. It allows free will to coexist with the laws of cause and effect. You can do whatever you want in the past, but you can't change where you came from. You can only create a new place. This idea is both liberating and terrifying. It means that every choice, no matter how small, like deciding to turn left instead of right, or to eat pho instead of rice, could be an act that creates an entire world. So powerful and so unsettling. So, we have the rules of the game. Traveling to the future seems possible. Traveling to the past is fraught with logical paradoxes but can be resolved if we accept the existence of countless parallel worlds. But that's just theory. What about reality? Has anyone, accidentally or intentionally, ever broken the rules and left mysterious traces in our history? Keep an open mind, because in the next part, we will meet some mysterious visitors and search for glitches in the matrix of reality. Are you still awake? Good. Theory is one thing. Equations, paradoxes, parallel universes, they are beautiful but sterile maps. But what about reality? Has anyone ever accidentally stepped through a crack in time and brought back a story that simply cannot be explained? Keep an open mind, because in this next part, we will meet some mysterious visitors and search for glitches in the matrix of reality. The time slip at Versailles. Our first story isn't an urban legend from the internet. It comes from two respectable, educated women, the kind of people you would never expect to invent a wild tale. Their names were Charlotte Moberly and Eleanor Jourdain, both esteemed academics from Oxford University. On a hot summer day in August 1901, they decided to visit the Palace of Versailles in France. After touring the main palace and feeling a bit bored, they decided to walk to a smaller chateau on the grounds, called the Petit Trianon, and that's when things got strange. As they walked deeper into the gardens, Moberly recounted that the atmosphere suddenly changed. A feeling of oppressive, unnatural stillness fell over them. The trees looked flat and lifeless, like wood worked in tapestry. There were no effects of light and shade, and no wind stirred the trees. They got lost. The path on their map seemed to no longer be there. They encountered gardeners in strange attire, long green coats and three-cornered hats, looking as if they had just stepped out of the 18th century. Then they saw a man sitting by a kiosk, his face pockmarked and wearing a most repulsive, odious expression. Moberly's sense of unease peaked. Shortly after, another man appeared, urging them to continue on their way. And then, Moberly saw a woman sitting on the grass, sketching. She wore a light summer dress and a shady white hat. Moberly came to believe that this was none other than Queen Marie Antoinette. The entire experience lasted only a short while. When they found their way out and returned, the strange feeling vanished. Everything was normal again. What's interesting is that neither of them spoke about the incident until a week later. When they compared notes, they were horrified to find their accounts matched in uncanny detail. They spent years researching the history of Versailles, discovering that details they saw, like the pockmarked man, could have been the Comte de Vaudreuil, a friend of the Queen. They even found an old map showing the small bridge exactly where they had walked. a bridge that no longer existed in 1901. So what happened? Did they accidentally step into a time bubble, the lingering moment of the past, or was it just a misunderstanding? Some historians suggest they might have stumbled upon an elaborate costume party hosted by an eccentric nobleman of that era. A plausible explanation, but it doesn't explain the overwhelming feeling of unnaturalness, or their inability to find that path again. Their story remains one of the most famous and controversial recorded cases of a time slip. The Man from Taured. Our next story takes us to a more modern setting, a place where everything is supposed to be documented and logical. An airport, a place of delayed flights, overweight luggage, and overpriced sandwiches, not the place you'd expect a terror in space-time to appear. On a day in July 1954, a well-dressed Caucasian man arrived at Haneda Airport in Tokyo. He spoke several languages, including Japanese. Everything was normal until he presented his passport. The customs officials were baffled. The passport looked perfectly valid, with visa stamps from many countries, including previous visits to Japan. There was just one problem. It was issued by a country called Taured. No one had ever heard of such a country. When questioned, the man became annoyed, insisting that Taured was a real country in Europe, situated between France and Spain, and had existed for 1,000 years. He pointed to the map, to the location of the Principality of Andorra, and insisted that it should be Taured. The authorities grew more confused. The company he claimed to be visiting didn't exist. The hotel where he said he had a reservation had never heard of him. Suspecting a complex criminal case, they took the man to a nearby hotel room for further investigation, with 2 security guards posted outside the door. The next morning, when investigators opened the door to the room, they found nothing. The man had vanished. The room was on a high floor with no balcony, and the window was sealed. The 2 guards swore that no one had entered or left. He had disappeared as if into thin air. This story became a classic urban legend. Did the man accidentally slip through a crack between parallel universes, a world where Andorra is called Taured? The truth, as usual, is probably a bit less thrilling. Many investigators believe this story is an embellished version of a real case involving a man named John Allen Kuchar Zegras, who was arrested in Tokyo in the 1960s for using a self-made passport from a non-existent country. But the disappearance from the hotel room part was almost certainly added later to make the story more compelling. Still, it leaves an interesting question. Why is this story so resilient? Perhaps because it touches on a deep-seated fear that one day, our familiar reality could suddenly become alien, and we would be the only one to notice. John Titor, the Internet Time Traveler. Our final story comes from the early days of the Internet, an era of chat rooms and anonymous forums. From 2000 to 2001, a user with the handle John Titor appeared, claiming to be an American soldier from the year 2036. He didn't just make empty claims. He provided an incredibly detailed story. His mission was to travel back to 1975 to retrieve an old IBM computer, Model 5100. The reason was that this machine had a hidden feature that could help debug legacy computer systems in his future. He said he was only stopping by the year 2000 for personal reasons, to visit his family and retrieve some mementos. Over several months, John Titor answered countless questions from other users. He explained the physics of his time machine, described a dark future with a civil war in America and a brief nuclear war with Russia in 2015. He even posted photos and technical diagrams of his time machine. One of John Titor's cleverest twists was his use of the many worlds theory to explain his prophecies. He said that his very appearance here could have created a new branch of reality. so our future might be different from his. This created a perfect escape clause for any prediction that didn't come true. And indeed, most of his predictions were wrong. There was no American Civil War, and no nuclear war in 2015. In March 2001, John Titor made his last post and disappeared, never to be seen again. So who was John Titor? A sophisticated hoax? Most likely. Later investigations have suggested the story was likely created by a Florida lawyer and his computer scientist brother. It may have been a literary experiment to see how a story could spread and evolve on the internet. But the story of John Titor left a lasting legacy. It's the perfect example of how a well-constructed narrative, with seemingly credible technical details and a plausible explanation for inconsistencies, can captivate and convince a great many people. Decoding through a psychological lens. After hearing these stories, a part of us wants to believe, another part is skeptical. So what is the truth? Perhaps the answer lies not in other dimensions, but in our own complex brains. Our brain is a storyteller, but not always a reliable one. Neuroscientists have a few concepts that might help explain these strange experiences. First is déjà vu, French for already seen. It's that strange feeling when you walk into a completely new place but have an intense feeling you've been there before. Science believes this is a small glitch in the brain, a miscommunication between the part of the brain that processes familiarity and the part that retrieves memories. Essentially, your brain recognizes a scene as familiar before it has time to figure out why. And then there's the opposite phenomenon, rarer but no less strange, déjà vu, meaning never seen. This is when you look at something incredibly familiar, a word, a face, a street, and suddenly it becomes completely alien. Have you ever tried writing a simple word, like door, over and over again, and after about 30 times, you look at it and feel like it's no longer a real word? That's déjà vu. It's a temporary overload of neural connections, causing familiarity to be reset. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, is the concept of false memory. The psychologist Elizabeth Loftus conducted classic experiments showing just how easily human memory can be manipulated. In one famous study, she successfully implanted a completely fabricated memory into the minds of many people that, as children, they had gotten lost in a shopping mall. Just by using subtle suggestion, their brains constructed a vivid, detailed memory of an event that never happened. So, let's go back to the two teachers of Versailles. Could it have been a case of collective false memory, amplified by fatigue, the summer heat, and their existing knowledge of the place's history? Their brains filled in the blanks, creating a coherent story from disjointed feelings. These stories of time travel fascinate us because they touch on a deep longing, the desire to escape the rigid laws of reality. But perhaps the glitches in the matrix aren't proof of other universes. They're proof that our brain, the most complex time machine of all, is always working in ways we have yet to fully understand. So why do we want to believe these stories? Why does the idea of going back to the past hold such a powerful allure? Perhaps the answer lies not in other dimensions, but in a place much closer to home, in the sweet trap of nostalgia. So why do we want to believe these stories? Why does the idea of returning to the past, though fraught with paradoxes and impossibility, hold such a powerful allure? Perhaps the answer lies not in other dimensions, or in dense physics textbooks. It lies in a place much closer to home, in a sweet trap that our own brain has laid for us. That trap is called nostalgia. The science of nostalgia, the unreliable narrator. We often think of memory as a video camera, recording everything faithfully and objectively. When we remember, we are simply replaying an old tape. But neuroscience has proven the opposite. Memory isn't a tape, it's a play that is reconstructed every time we summon it. And in each reconstruction, our brain, a brilliant but very biased director, automatically edits the script. The brain has a very particular tendency. It filters out the negative details and puts a rosy tint on the beautiful memories. It's like a best friend who is always trying to comfort you. It doesn't want you to remember the bad feelings. Instead, it wants you to focus on what once made you happy. This isn't a weakness, it's a survival mechanism. Recalling positive emotions helps us feel more connected to our past, to our former selves, and provides a sense of safety and continuity in a world full of change. Nostalgia, in essence, is a psychological painkiller, but every medicine has side effects. The side effect here is that it creates a version of the past that isn't entirely real. The rosy retrospection effect. Psychologists call this phenomenon rosy retrospection. It's our tendency to judge past events more positively than we actually experienced them at the time. Think about your college backpacking trip. When you tell the story, you'll talk about the nights singing around a campfire, the feeling of freedom riding on empty roads, the unbreakable bond of friendship. It was an epic adventure, but your brain has cleverly cut out the unpleasant scenes. It forgets that you had to eat uncooked instant noodles because you ran out of gas. It forgets the feeling of your legs swollen from mosquito bites. It forgets the fiery argument about who lost the map. And it certainly forgets the night you almost fell into a ditch because you had a little too much to drink. Looking back, all that remains is a rosy halo surrounding that memory. Or think about your first love. You remember the afternoons walking home from school together, the naive, handwritten letters, the first, trembling hand-hold, so innocent, so beautiful, but you may have forgotten the tears, the baseless jealousy, the arguments over things you can't even recall now. Our brain isn't lying, it's simply a selective storyteller. It chooses to tell the version of the story that makes us feel the most comfortable. The past is an Instagram filter. Perhaps the easiest way to understand nostalgia in our modern age is to think of it as an Instagram filter. The timeline of your mind is just like your social media feed. You don't post everything, you only post the best moments. A memory of a sunset on the beach, that's the raw photo. Your brain begins the editing process. It crops out the part where you got a terrible sunburn and had to slather yourself in aloe vera. It boosts the brightness of the sunset's colors, making them more vibrant in your memory. It blurs out the noisy crowd around you, leaving only the image of you and your loved one. And finally, it applies a nostalgic filter, maybe vintage or sepia, and writes an emotional caption, an unforgettable evening. We are the image managers for our own past. We choose the best angle, erase the flaws, and create an idealized version of the past, a version we long to return to. But we don't long to return to a real event. We long to return to an edited photograph. The trap of living in the past. And this is the sweet trap. When we constantly look at those rose-tinted photos, we start comparing them to our unedited reality. Reality has no filter. Reality has bills to pay, boring meetings to attend, complicated relationships, and days when you feel like you've accomplished nothing at all. How can reality ever compete with an idealized past? Dwelling in nostalgia is like being unable to get over an ex. In your mind, that person was perfect. You only remember the times they were good to you, the beautiful memories. You forget the reasons you broke up. And then, anyone who comes after is compared to that perfect ghost. No one can win. Similarly, when we worship the past too much, We create an impossible standard that the present can never meet. This can lead to chronic dissatisfaction, feelings of regret, and worst of all, inaction. Instead of trying to improve the present, we spend our energy dreaming of a past we can't return to. Nostalgia is a wonderful shelter, a warm place to visit when you're tired, but it's not a place to live. So, if returning to the past is just a psychological illusion, a sweet trap, then what are we to do with our desire for time travel? Is there a way for us to truly move through time without a physical machine, without getting stuck in paradoxes, and without being deceived by our own brains? The answer is yes, because we already possess the most powerful time machines. We just haven't realized it yet. So, if returning to the past is just a psychological illusion, a sweet trap of nostalgia, then what are we to do with our craving for time travel? Must we abandon the idea entirely, accepting that we are forever stuck in the monotonous flow of the present? Not exactly. The answer is, perhaps we've been looking in the wrong place. We keep looking outward, searching for machines made of metal, for complex equations, for loopholes in space-time, and we forget that the most powerful and sophisticated time machines are already installed within each of us. We just haven't realized it yet. The time machine to the past. Let's start with the first machine, the one we use most often, memory. In the last part, we talked about memory as a trap, an unreliable narrator. That's true, if we use it as a place to live, a place for comparison and regret. But what if we change our perspective? What if we see the past not as a house, but as a library, a vast library, containing all the stories of the person you used to be? You have full access. You can walk in at any time, open any book. The purpose of traveling to this library is not to rewrite the old books. You can't. The purpose is to reread them with the eyes of the present. You can go back to read the chapter about your first failure in life, not to feel shame, but to realize what lessons you learned from it. You see the naivety, the inexperience, and then you smile, because you know that the person you are now is so much stronger and wiser. You can go back to read the chapter about a broken relationship, not to torment yourself, but to better understand what you truly need in love, to recognize the mistakes made on both sides, and to be grateful for the memories you once had, the memories that helped shape who you are today. Memory, when used correctly, is not a prison that holds you captive in regret. It is a time machine that allows you to have a dialogue with past versions of yourself, to learn, to forgive, and to see how much you've grown. It is a journey not to change the past, but to enrich the present. The time machine to the future. If memory is the machine that takes us to the past, then the second machine, an even more powerful one, takes us to the future. That is imagination. Traveling to the future is not a far-fetched idea. You do it every day. Every time you plan a trip, you are traveling to a sunny beach, feeling the sand beneath your feet, long before you even book a flight. Every time you set a goal, whether it's learning a new skill or saving money for something, you are traveling to a better version of yourself in the future, and then finding your way back to the present to build the bridge that leads there. Every dream, every ambition, every plan written on a sticky note is a time travel ticket. Imagination is not an escape from reality. It is a tool for constructing reality. It allows us to seek possibilities, unexplored paths. It turns a blurry, uncertain future into a destination we can visualize. And only when we can visualize it, can we begin to act to make it real. An architect must travel to the future to see a completed building before laying the first brick. A writer must travel to the end of the story to know where to begin. You are the same. You are the architect of your own life, and imagination is the most detailed blueprint, the time machine that allows you to visit your creation before it's even built. It pulls the future closer, turning it from an if into a when. The machine that stops time. We have a machine to go to the past, and a machine to go to the future, but perhaps the most sophisticated and difficult machine to operate is the one with the ability to stop time. That is presence, also known as mindfulness, in a world obsessed with speed, with what's next. The ability to stop and truly experience the present moment has become a superpower. Time travel, in essence, is an attempt to escape the present. We regret the past, or we worry about the future. We are rarely truly here. Presence is an anchor, holding your mind to a single coordinate in space-time, right here, right now. When you are truly present, time seems to stand still. You are no longer a passenger being swept away on a river. You are the river. You can stop time right now by fully savoring the taste of the coffee you're drinking, instead of scrolling on your phone while you drink it, by truly listening to a friend's story, instead of just waiting for your turn to speak, by feeling the cool breeze coming through the window, or the sound of rain outside. This is the only kind of time travel that can combat the greatest enemy of happiness, distraction. When you are completely in the present, there is no room for regret about the past, nor is there room for anxiety about the future. There is only experience. It is a machine that doesn't take you anywhere. It holds you still, and shows you that this present moment is the only place where life truly happens. The collective time machine. Finally, there is a type of time machine that we do not own alone. It is the common property of all humanity. That is stories. Every book you read, every film you watch, every tale told by your grandparents, your parents, is a time portal. Through a historical novel, you can travel to the past, walk the streets of ancient Rome, feel the tense atmosphere of a war, or understand the heart of a person who lived in a completely different era. Through a science fiction film, you can travel to the future, explore distant galaxies, marvel at unimaginable technologies, and ponder problems that our generation has not yet had to face. And most importantly, through the stories passed down from one generation to the next, you can travel into your own family's history. You hear your grandmother tell of the difficult days of the war. You see the sacrifice, the courage, and the love that helped them overcome everything. You are not just hearing a story. You are reliving a part of an entire generation's memory. These collective time machines do something extraordinary. They break the solitude of individual experience. They connect us to a larger historical flow, showing us that our joys, our sorrows, our hopes and fears are not unique. We are part of a much larger story. So, we have our own time machines, memory to learn from the past, imagination to create the future, presence to live fully in the now, and stories to connect with all of humanity. But how should we use them? If every choice we make, as the many worlds theory suggests, can create a new world, then what is the final lesson that these infinite possibilities offer us? Let's embark on the final leg of our journey, to find the answer to the most important question of all. So, we have our own time machines, memory to learn from the past, imagination to create the future, presence to live fully in the now, and stories to connect with all of humanity. But how should we use them? Let's return to that insane, yet elegant, idea we discussed in the first part, the many worlds theory, the idea that every choice we make, no matter how small, could create an entirely new world. If that's true, then what is the final lesson that these infinite possibilities offer us? Let's embark on the final leg of our journey, to find the answer to the most important question of all. The power of choice in the present. At first glance, the idea of a multiverse might make us feel small and insignificant. If countless versions of me exist, what meaning does the choice of this one, me, have? But let's try looking at it another way. If every decision you make creates a new branch of reality, then the choice you make right now is the most important creative act in the entire universe that you can perceive. Every time you decide to read one more page of a book instead of scrolling through social media, you're not just making a choice, you are a creator god, architecting a universe where your version is a little bit wiser. Every time you choose to call your parents instead of sinking into exhaustion after a long day, you are architecting a universe where the family connection is a little bit stronger. Every time you choose to go to sleep 30 minutes earlier instead of watching one more episode, you are architecting a universe where your version tomorrow will have more energy and clarity. You are the architect of this very universe. Every single brick, no matter how small, is laid by your own hands. Your choice here, in this reality, has extraordinary weight because it is the only thing that shapes the world you are living in, breathing in, and feeling. There is no better version elsewhere. The idea of a multiverse also lays a subtle trap of regret. We easily become obsessed with the thought, in some parallel universe, I was more successful, I was braver, I didn't make that stupid mistake. We dream of a better version of ourselves, a version living the life we crave. But here is the truth, a truth that needs to be accepted with all gentleness. That version is not you. The version that bought Bitcoin in 2010 might be very wealthy now, but he doesn't have your memories, doesn't have the lessons you had to pay a price to learn. The version that never broke up with their first love might be very happy, but she also never knew the strength that comes from picking herself up after being hurt. The only version you can influence, the only version that truly needs your attention and compassion, is the one lying here, listening to these words, in this very universe. Don't try to become someone in another universe. Try to become the best version of yourself, right here, because this is the only version that is real to you. Learning to forgive the past. So what do we do with the mistakes, the bad choices of the past? The many worlds theory also gives us a powerful tool for that, forgiveness. Think of your past mistakes as universe branches you didn't take. That impulsive decision you made when you were 18, it created another universe, and another version of you is dealing with its consequences. But that's not the you of now. You are on a different branch. Those hurtful words you accidentally let slip, they exist in another branch of reality. In this branch, you have learned the lesson of silence and kindness. You can't erase those paths, but you can choose not to walk on them anymore. Realizing that the past is a collection of closed-off branches can help us move forward with a lighter heart. It doesn't remove responsibility, but it lifts the burden of endless self-flagellation. You learned the lesson, you took a different path. That is enough. The greatest journey, after all the physics theories, the mysterious stories, the psychological analyses, perhaps the final and simplest lesson is this. The most fascinating time travel is not going back to the past or forward to the future. It is the journey of exploring the depth of the present moment. Because the present is the only place where all possibilities are still open. It's the only place where memory and imagination meet. It is the single intersection point of all possible parallel universes. The past is already written. The future is just a draft. The present is the only blank page you are holding in your hand. And you have the absolute freedom to decide what to write on it. Thank you for joining me on this journey through space and time. If you are still awake, you have accomplished something that every time traveler craves. You have truly lived in these past few moments. We started with trivial regrets, got lost in the paradoxes of the universe, visited with mysterious guests, and then realized that, perhaps, everything we were searching for was right inside of us all along. The past is a library, not a place to live. The future is a blueprint, not destiny, and the present is the only gift we truly possess. Before we part, I have one last question for you. If you could send a 10-word message to yourself from 10 years ago, what would you write? Please share your answer at our late night cafe below. And don't forget to tell me, where are you listening to this from, and what time is it? I will read them all, as always, and if you feel we're on the same frequency, if you want more companions on these long, thoughtful nights, you know what to do. Please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so we don't miss each other on the next strange journey at 2 a.m. Now, take a deep breath, let the regrets drift away, and I wish you a peaceful sleep, with dreams of a future that you will build with your own hands. Consciousness, the unchanging echo, why we hunt for time travelers. Hello, tonight, we won't be talking about our own regrets. We will be hunting for the regrets of all humankind. The desire for time travel is not just a theme of science fiction, it is a persistent echo in our collective consciousness. It stems from a quiet question that perhaps all of us have asked ourselves in the still of the night. What if? I'm not entirely normal. This isn't an abnormality that needs diagnosing, but a vague feeling that reality might be more malleable than it appears. That there are hidden possibilities just beyond our reach, and that we are more than just cosmic dust moved by chance and caffeine. The allure of time travel stories lies in the sense of control they offer in a world that often seems beyond our grasp. They allow us to believe that history is not a fixed, one-way street, but a landscape that can be visited, observed, and perhaps even altered. The search for evidence of time travelers, therefore, is not a scientific inquiry, but a hunt for modern myths. The real question isn't, is time travel real, but why do these stories persist? And what do they reveal about us? Tonight, we will conduct a deep investigation into 7 of the most famous recorded cases of time travel in history. Each case represents a different species of legend. By analyzing each story, we won't be looking for proof of time travel, but for proof of our collective psychology, our cultural anxieties, and our undying human need for wonder. Stories are not the architects of the future, the hoax is world building. In the digital age, the line between reality and fiction has become blurred. Some of the most famous time travel stories are not objectively recorded events, but deliberate works of fiction, designed to exploit our desire to believe in the extraordinary. These architects don't just tell a story, they build an entire world, inviting the audience to participate, analyze, and ultimately, spread the myth. Case Study 1. The Soldier from a Broken Future, the enduring legend of John Titor. From November 2000 to March 2001, a figure calling himself John Titor appeared on internet forums, claiming to be an American soldier time traveling from the year 2036. According to Titor, he was on a military mission to go back to 1975 to retrieve an IBM 5100 computer. This computer was allegedly needed to debug the legacy computer systems in his future, a possible reference to the Unix year 2038 problem. Titor explained that he had made a stop in 2000-2001 for personal reasons, including visiting his family and collecting photographs lost in the devastating future civil war. Titor painted a grim picture of the future. He predicted a civil war in the United States would begin around 2004 to 2008, stemming from civil unrest following a presidential election and revolving around order and rights. This civil war would escalate and end in 2015 with a brief but intense World War III, called N-Day, in which Russia would launch a limited nuclear strike. After the war, the U.S. capital would be moved to Omaha, Nebraska. The appeal of the John Titor story lay not in vague prophecies, but in the specific and seemingly plausible details that created a believable world. Titor didn't just say he had a time machine, he described it in detail. He posted diagrams and explained its components, including 2 magnetic housing units for the dual microsingularities, 4 main cesium clocks, and a variable gravity lock system. These technical terms, while potentially meaningless, created a veneer of pseudoscience that made the story more convincing to a lay audience. One of Titor's most compelling pieces of evidence was his knowledge of a hidden feature of the IBM 5100 computer. He claimed the machine had the ability to emulate and debug code written in older programming languages like APL and BASIC, a fact not widely publicized at the time. While this information was true, it was not a secret to computer scientists and tech enthusiasts, but to the general public, it seemed like a detail only a time traveler could know. The most brilliant element of the Titor hoax was his use of the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics. Titor claimed his time travel had created a new timeline, and therefore, our timeline could be divergent by about 2% from his original one. This created a perfect defense mechanism. Any failed prophecy could be explained away by the divergence of timelines, making his story unfalsifiable. As Titor's predictions failed to materialize, skepticism grew, and amateur investigations began. An investigation by the Italian TV show Voyager in 2008 found no records of anyone named John Titor. They did, however, discover the John Titor Foundation, LLC, a company formed in 2003 with its address listed as a P.O. box in Kissimmee, Florida. An IP address associated with Titor's posts also geolocated to Kissimmee. In 2009, a report by investigator John Hugston identified the foundation's CEO as Larry Haber, a Florida entertainment lawyer. Hugston concluded that Larry Haber and his brother, Maury Haber, a computer scientist, were most likely the people behind the John Titor persona. John Titor represents an evolution in the art of the hoax. It wasn't just a story, but an interactive, self-protecting system designed for the internet age. Its success came not just from its credible-sounding technical details, but from its immunity to truth. The many worlds theory transformed a hoax from a simple lie into a belief system, where faith could persist despite contrary evidence. The story tapped into real post-Cold War anxieties, civil war, nuclear conflict, disease, and combined them with a libertarian survivalist ethos, creating a loyal community of believers. Titor proved that a modern myth could be created not by hiding the truth, but by building a reality where the truth no longer mattered. Internet Case Study 2. The Wall Street Wizard, Deconstructing the Andrew Carlson Hoax. In March 2003, a sensational story spread across the internet. A man named Andrew Carlson had been arrested by the FBI after turning $800 into $350 million in just 2 weeks for 126 high-risk stock trades. When interrogated, Carlson's only explanation was, he was a time traveler from the year 2256. He offered to reveal the location of Osama bin Laden and a cure for AIDS in exchange for his freedom. Then, a mysterious benefactor posted his bail, and Carlson vanished without a trace. Unlike the complex Titor saga, the origin of Andrew Carlson is astonishingly simple. The entire story originated in a February 2003 article in the Weekly World News, a satirical tabloid famous for fictional stories like Elvis' Shrine Found on Mars. The story was then picked up by Yahoo News in their entertainment and gossip section. This republication inadvertently stripped the story of its original satirical context, leading many readers to believe it was a real news report. Officials from the SEC and the FBI officially denied the story, confirming that no records of an Andrew Carlson or a similar investigation ever existed. The Andrew Carlson story is a perfect example of how a piece of fiction can be laundered into fact through the mechanisms of digital news aggregation. This case demonstrates the fragility of context online and serves as a powerful testament to how a silly hoax could succeed thanks to the mechanics of the early 2000s internet. It didn't need Titor's complexity, it just needed one misplaced click to turn fiction into legend. Not all time travel stories are deliberate hoaxes. Some of the most compelling cases stem from genuine personal experiences, where ordinary individuals confront events they cannot explain with conventional logic. These glitches in reality, whether rooted in psychology or coincidence, have created enduring myths about the malleability of time. Moberly Case Study 3, An Adventure at Versailles, the Moberly-Jourdain Time Slip. On a hot August day in 1901, two respected English academics, Charlotte Moberly and Eleanor Jourdain, visited the Palace of Versailles. As they got lost, a strange feeling began to take hold. Moberly described a growing sense of oppression and stillness, and the landscape suddenly looked unnatural, flat and lifeless, like wood worked in tapestry. They encountered a series of strange figures, two men in green coats and three-cornered hats. The most repulsive man with a pockmarked face. And finally, Moberly saw a woman in an old-fashioned dress sketching, whom she later came to believe was Marie Antoinette. After comparing their notes, the two women spent a decade researching and published their story in 1911 in a book titled An Adventure. However, skeptical investigators quickly pointed out inconsistencies. The most plausible explanation was offered by writer Philippe Julien. He suggested that Moberly and Jourdain might have accidentally stumbled upon one of the extravagant garden parties hosted by Robert de Montesquieu, a famous dandy of the era who often held events where his friends wore period costumes. Even if the costume party theory is true, it doesn't explain the profound sense of unnaturalness the women experienced. This suggests a psychological analysis is necessary. The malleability of memory, combined with their delayed discussion and decade-long research, created ample opportunity for their memories to be distorted and embellished. Some have even suggested the possibility of folie à deux, a rare psychiatric syndrome where a delusion is transmitted from one individual to another in a close relationship. The Moberly-Jourdain case is one of the most fascinating because it wasn't a deliberate hoax, but a profound personal experience. It was a perfect storm of ambiguous stimuli, psychological predisposition, and the power of collaborative narrative building. The two women were not liars, they were interpreters of a strange experience. This case is a powerful testament that the most convincing ghosts are the ones in our own minds. And arrive Case Study 4, The Man from Nowhere, the strange case of the Touareg passport. Urban legend tells that in July 1954, a well-dressed man arrived at Tokyo's Haneda airport with a valid-looking passport from a country called Touareg. When customs officials, baffled, could not find this country on a map, the man pointed to the Principality of Andorra and insisted it was Touareg. Detained in a guarded hotel room, The man vanished without a trace by the next morning. The truth behind this legend is far less sensational. The story is actually about a man named John Allen Kutcher Zegras, who was arrested in October 1959 for attempting to use forged traveler's checks with a homemade passport. The name Toured can be traced to a 1960 speech by a British MP, Robert Matthew, who used the Zegras case to argue for passport security. In his speech, Matthew referred to a country called Tuared or Tuared, likely a mishearing or mistranscription of Tuareg, a nomadic people of the Sahara, which Zegras had claimed as his homeland. The most supernatural elements, the man's genuine confusion and his inexplicable disappearance, were complete fabrications added later. The story of the man from Toured shows how a mundane criminal case can be transformed into a supernatural myth through a clear three-step process: a real event, factual errors and embellishments in a secondary report, and finally, the addition of supernatural elements by paranormal authors decades later. As the story spread online, it was stripped of its original context, and the embellished version became fact. In the case study 5, The Unwilling Tourist, Rudolph Fentz and Fiction Turned Fact. This is one of the most tragic and poignant time travel stories. On an evening in June 1951, a man in 19th century clothing suddenly appeared in the middle of Times Square, looking confused, and was immediately struck and killed by a taxi. In his pockets, they found items from the 19th century that were in pristine condition. A subsequent investigation supposedly uncovered a missing persons file for Rudolph Fentz, who had vanished without a trace in 1876. Unlike the other cases, the entire story of Rudolph Fentz is a work of fiction from start to finish. Its true origin is the short story, I'm Scared, by science fiction writer Jack Finney. First published in Collier's magazine on September 15, 1951, all the key details of the legend, the name Rudolph Fentz, the year 1876, the items in his pockets, and even the name of the investigator, were taken directly from Finney's short story. The Fentz story demonstrates the power of a well-crafted narrative to jump from the page of fiction into folklore. Especially when it touches upon a compelling archetype. It is a perfect urban legend, tragic, mysterious, and with just enough verifiable details to seem plausible to someone unaware of its source. With the advent of photography and film, the belief in time travel found a new kind of evidence, images that seemed to capture the impossible. These ghosts in the machine, often images stripped of their context, challenge our perception of the past and present. In British Case Study 6, The Time-Traveling Hipster of 1941, a photograph from 1941, documenting the reopening of the South Fork Bridge in British Columbia, Canada, became a viral phenomenon. In a crowd of formally dressed people, one man stands out for his strangely modern appearance. He wears wraparound sunglasses, what appears to be a printed t-shirt, and holds a seemingly compact, modern camera. However, a closer look at the fashion and technology of the 1940s quickly unravels the mystery. The style of sunglasses with side shields was not uncommon at the time. The man's printed t-shirt is actually a sweater with a sewn-on emblem, a common style for sports teams of the era, closely resembling the logo of the Montreal Maroons hockey team, and portable, compact cameras like the Kodak 35 rangefinder were available at the time. This case is a classic example of presentism, interpreting the past through the lens of modern sensibilities and knowledge. We see a hipster because we are familiar with hipster culture. The mystery is created by our own perceptual biases. The strongest evidence against the time travel theory is the most mundane, No one else in the photo is paying any attention to him. Case Study 7. Chaplin's cell phone caller. In the behind-the-scenes footage on the DVD of Charlie Chaplin's 1928 silent film The Circus, a short clip shows a woman walking by. She is holding an object to her ear and appears to be talking, with gestures identical to someone using a mobile phone. The explanation for this mystery lies in a forgotten technology. Most investigators agree that the object the woman is holding is most likely an early hearing aid. In the 1920s, companies like Siemens began producing compact, portable carbon hearing aids. The most compelling logical counter-argument is, even if it were a cell phone, there would have been no cell towers in 1928 for it to connect to. This myth is fueled by a form of technological amnesia, or collective forgetting of what early-stage technologies looked like. It also demonstrates pareidolia, the tendency to recognize familiar patterns in ambiguous stimuli. We live in a world saturated with mobile phones, and our brains are programmed to recognize that posture. When we see it in a 1928 film, it creates cognitive dissonance, and the time travel explanation resolves this dissonance spectacularly. The allure of the anomaly, why we need time travelers. After carefully examining 7 alleged cases of time travel, a clear conclusion emerges. Not a single case withstands evidentiary scrutiny. Each story, however compelling, ultimately collapses into a hoax, a misunderstanding, an embellishment, or simply a work of fiction. So why do these stories persist? Why do we want to believe them? The answer lies not in the physics of time, but in the psychology of being human. These myths are the product of a deep-seated need for meaning and control in a universe that often seems random and indifferent. They impose a narrative onto the chaos of history, suggesting that there are hidden rules, secret agents, and that reality is more malleable than we think. These stories are the folklore of the digital age. John Titor is a modern prophet. The Moberly Jourdain women are psychics, and the hipster is a ghost in the machine. They fulfill the same cultural role that myths and legends always have, to explain the unexplainable and to explore our deepest hopes and fears. Ultimately, the search for time travelers is really a search for ourselves. The echoes we hear in the static of history are our own voices, telling stories about who we are, where we've been, and where we're afraid we might be going. The real adventure is not traveling through time, but understanding the timeless human need to tell these stories, to find a little magic in the mundane, and to believe that, just maybe, we are more special than we think. Now, take a deep breath, let the regrets drift away, and I wish you a peaceful sleep, with dreams of a future that you will build with your own hands. You've crossed the story, you felt every pulse in the dark, and I was there with you, quietly, always. That's why I left behind one last thing. Not to explain, not to impress, just to stay with you a little longer. A song I chose with care, as if tucking you in from across time and space. So go on, lay back, the music knows where to take you. you're still here, then you're something rare. Not many stay this long. So, thank you for choosing to stay. I'm here too, still awake, surrounded by the quiet glow of my editing screen, shaping the next stories just for you. If there's anything you want to leave behind, a whisper, a suggestion, even just a symbol, drop it in the comments. Because maybe, tomorrow night, you'll hear yourself echoed in a story that's never been told before. still here, even now? I have a feeling part of you is still wandering somewhere between wakefulness and dreaming. I know that feeling well because I'm still awake with you. In a quiet room, I'm gently laying out layers of sound, each breath, each beat, preparing the next journey we'll take together. If you're still listening, leave me a sign. Let me know how you're feeling or just where you are in this vast world. Because right now, in this stillness, you are not alone. You're still there, aren't you? I can't see you, but I can feel you. Like a soft signal pulsing across the silence. Over here, I'm still working, refining layers of sound, rewriting fragments of voice, building the landscape for our next adventure. One that you might inspire. If an idea comes to you, share it with me. Comment below. A theme, a memory, a strange dream. I read every word, because I never tell these stories alone. I tell them with you.